ya está funcionando? Ok.
Buenas tardes. Antes de iniciar, transmitiremos un mensaje de la Comisión Local de Seguridad de la Escuela. Nos encontramos en el Auditorio Rosario Castellanos. En caso de tener que desalojar este recinto, deberemos hacerlo de forma ordenada, conservando siempre la calma. Procederemos de la siguiente manera. Las personas que ocupan las primeras 5 filas deberán hacerlo por la salida de emergencia, ubicada a la derecha de este auditorio. De las filas 6 hacia atrás, lo harán por la puerta de entrada, saldrán de este inmueble y se dirigirán hasta el punto de encuentro que está localizado entre el edificio A, de la escuela, y el Centro de Investigaciones de Diseño Industrial, CIDI, de la Facultad de Arquitectura. Si alguna persona no puede desplazarse rápidamente, deberá resguardarse junto a las columnas, que son los lugares señalados como las zonas de menor riesgo. Le solicitamos seguir en todo momento las indicaciones de los brigadistas. Gracias por su atención.
¿Listo? Pues buenas tardes. Después de esta sacudida que no estaba planeada en absoluto, pues queremos cerrar con broche de oro y tenemos esta plenaria con la Claire. Claire Acevedo is an Australian educator now based in the United Kingdom, where she completed her PhD in applied linguistics at the Center for Research in Education and Educational Technology at Open University. She's an external member of the research group on multilingualism, literacy and linguistic education, Formul, at the Complutense University in Madrid. Concurrently, she provides educational services to schools and education sectors across Europe and South America, where she leads action, research, and professional development projects in English, Spanish, and Swedish. She's experienced in using systemic functional linguistics via Sydney School, genre pedagogy to improve reading and writing outcomes for underachieving students in all areas of the school curriculum. She has collaborated with Dr. David Rose, University of Sydney, over 2 decades on the latest research into genre-based reading, and she specializes in delivering reading to learn literacy acceleration professional development to teachers and teacher educators. She's the co-founder and deputy chair of Reading for Life, a nonprofit association that promotes social justice in society and equity in education all over the world.
Thank you very much, Rubén. I'm just testing here. Well, bienvenidos los valientes, ¿no? El último día, cuando yo supe que iba a presentar el último día, pensé, bueno, iba a tener como 6 o 7 personas ahí. Tengo que decir que en mi país la gente no es tan valiente, o sea, el último día no hay tanta gente, pero están muy bienvenidos y voy a darles un viaje alrededor del mundo con los proyectos de Reading to Learn. Y primero voy a introducir un poco los conceptos de Reading to Learn, pero me doy cuenta de que parece que todos saben de Reading to Learn y no necesitan mi introducción, pero eso está bien, lo voy a hacer rapidito porque puede haber alguien que no está al día con Reading to Learn y también está bien repasar los conceptos básicos para tener una fundación para entender lo que voy a decir acerca de los diferentes proyectos en Sudamérica, España y Portugal. Y ahora me doy cuenta que esta presentación es en inglés, ¿no es cierto? Perdón, voy a cambiar al inglés. Tengo un botón de español aquí. Si alguien me habla en español, ¡pum!, sale español. Perdón. Okay, so I'm changing to English now for my presentation. So I came to know some of the key people in Alsfal back in 2009 in Mar del Plata. Let's see if people remember when we met in 2019. There we are, a young bevy of beauties there. So, oh, it's a bit fuzzy. That's good, actually, that you can't see too many differences. So there I am, and there's our host, Natalia. Here's Laura Flores, and there you are, where I can see up the back, Teresa Otesa, Estela, who didn't make it. We have another colleague there, and then, of course, Gillian, who's made a great effort to come today. Lovely to see her. So that was when I first came in contact with Alsfal, and I feel like I've been a sort of a de facto member of Alsfal ever since. I turn up as often as I can at the conferences, and I'm very much in contact. I've done quite a few projects in person and online I'll talk about later, but I've been really in contact ever since then with different people there. And the invitation to come here today was made by Natalia a long time ago. So this has been a very long-standing invitation. And if we look carefully over here, all right, and we look into Natalia's hand, we can see there she's writing down that she would invite me in 2024 to Mexico for the... She plans ahead, she really does. And so I'm very glad to be here. And as you can see, we had quite a nice time. There seemed to be quite a few empty bottles and glasses there. So we'll move on then. So as I said before, I'm just going to, we're sort of two parts to talk about reading to learn as systemic functional linguistics recontextualizes classroom pedagogy. So I was going to talk a little bit about the background principles and the tools, but I'm going to rush through that because I think we don't want to overdo it, but there still might be somebody who'd like a little refreshment there. And then I'm going to look at applications of reading to learn in Spanish and Portuguese speaking contexts from Argentina. I think I have two from Argentina, one from Portugal. The project in Spain had 3 different things happening there. Colombia, we've definitely got one, and Chile and the United States. So as the time runs out, I'll probably be more brief with the parts of the presentation that happen to come at the end. But I think we'll get through quite a bit. So just to do the refreshing part, we just want to think what is reading to learn. So it's both the teacher professional development program and the classroom teaching and learning methodology. So the same name is given to the two things. So some people, sometimes they say, so what is it? You know, you're doing this professional development, but then what's reading to learn? So it's the same name for both things that we're doing. Is developed by our colleague, Dr. David Rose from the University of Sydney. I don't think he's made it, I'm not sure. Oh, he has. He's been to Puebla twice. Has David been? David's been to Puebla, well, once at least, maybe twice. He's been to Brazil. I'm not sure what other countries he's been to, but he knows we're here today. Argentina, he's been to Argentina. He knows we're all here today, and he sends you all his very best wishes. So as you know, it builds on the genre approach to writing, and it includes reading, and we talk about it as being a methodology for accelerating writing. So when we start with the reading, we find the students can then take the patterns from the reading and move forward very quickly with high-level writing, which contrasts to, you know, the sort of things Anne was talking about this morning in second language learning. It's often we'll learn the oral language first, and then we start looking at the written language, and then we've got to sort of shift the grammar from the spoken form to the written form, and it can sort of take a long time, and we often find students are still writing the way they speak well into secondary school and even university, and they might get through, but you know, their grades are not the same. And what we do is, even with beginner students, we expose them to the written language, and we use oral language to teach the written language, and they can very quickly, they don't have to go through this long process of first learning oral language, then learning the written language like small children would. So this is why we get the acceleration effect, I think. So we can use it in any language, any stage of school. all areas of the curriculum, and we just use the usual classroom materials. So it's been effective in democratizing the classroom, as the title of the presentation suggests, and that's based on the idea, sort of Bernstein's idea of distributing knowledge equally amongst all students in the classroom. So that's what we talk about, the democratizing the classroom and closing the gap between the low achieving students and the high achieving students. And I've been working for over 20 years now. And when I start with the teachers, I say to them, actually, I can guarantee you that you can close the gap between the lowest achieving students and the highest achieving students in your class if you do reading to learn regularly, if you become fluent in it, and if you use it as an effective classroom tool. But of course, they have to do it. And that is often what my job is, to get the teachers to do it. And so there's a lot of coaching and mentoring and lots of things. Jose David was talking about, you know, you need to really be supporting and scaffolding the teachers to do this. So that definitely develops the teachers' knowledge about language and about pedagogy, and then they can share the knowledge with about language with the students through the pedagogy. So it's focusing on reading for meaning as well as how the texts work. And the classroom interaction pattern for supporting reading engages all students in the meaning making. And apart from ensuring comprehension, it builds the self-esteem of the struggling learners. And that's been one of the things that really enthuses the teachers and gets them really hooked on reading to learn, to keep going forward, that they see their struggling students participating in a way that they hadn't done before. So where did reading to learn come from? Well, it was Dr. David Rose, working his desire to bring literacy to Indigenous communities in Australia. And we can see him there. And in his cleaned up there, that's what he's more or less looking like now. And the pedagogy developed over many years, from an early years approach with stories to a pedagogy for learners of all ages, working with texts from across the curriculum in many languages around the world. So here we've got some students in a senior school vocational program in Sweden using it, and we even have it in Swedish Sign Language. And if I get through the presentation, I'll direct you to a website where you can see, just look at the videos in Swedish Sign Language. You can get a subtitle in Spanish or Portuguese. And if you turn off the voiceover in Swedish, you can just watch what's happening in the classroom and you can read the subtitles. So I hope I get to the end to show you that. So it's been used in different parts, different places around the world. As you can see, it's used quite a lot in Australia, of course, and in the outback locations. David still has contact with Indigenous communities and works with those communities. In South Africa, Mike Hart, lots of programs in Europe. I'll talk about the Spanish-speaking ones in Asia, Indonesia, North America, Colombia, some things happening in Brazil. Some of them are school programs, some of them academic programs, and in Chile and Argentina. Now you can see here, I've got a star here for Mexico. All right. So I'm hoping that after this, we can get some, some articles written about some projects that I didn't know were happening in Mexico. So we want to get them published. And I hope, as I show the presentation, quite often after I give one of these pre-Congress institutes, somebody takes up the reading to learn and we get another project. So we want to hear about it. We want everyone to shout out about their projects and share with everybody else. So let's hope we get something in Mexico. Hopefully I'm going to Puebla next week. Yes, and I'm going to do the same course. Sorry, it's the same things, but I'm going to do the same course in Puebla. So we've got two possibilities to get some projects, really up and running. So please go to Dr. David Rose's website. He's got resources there, and this is the homework. Put your hand up if you were in my workshop for reading to learn. All right, that's your homework. I said to go and finish looking at the videos on the website. All right, just got to make sure, you've got to follow up. They don't do it. Yeah, I know. Okay, so there's a compromiso to watch those videos because we didn't get time to do everything I wanted to in the workshop. All right, so I think you've seen this before. Reading to Learn builds on the work that was done in the 1980s with the Writing in the Primary School project, and some people are still working on that same body of knowledge and research that came out of that project. Then it moved on to the secondary school curriculum in the Write It Right, and there's some people still working on this around really the teaching and learning cycle, okay, which focuses predominantly on writing. And then we get Reading to Learn coming from about 2000 onwards, but it certainly builds on all of this. And so it's part of genre pedagogy, because where I work in Sweden, they call the teaching and learning cycle genre pedagogy, and they don't know what Reading to Learn is. And I keep saying it is genre pedagogy, but you know how terms come into a country. So it is, if anyone else is wondering about that, that's how it works. And that's when I became involved. Here, I was a teacher, a secondary school teacher, and I used all the materials that came out of the Sydney school at that time for writing the teaching and learning cycle in Melbourne, which is my hometown in the south. But I found in the secondary school, after a while, most of the materials that I was able to access were for the primary school, and they're sort of bottoming out. I wanted a little bit more. I was adapting it myself to the secondary school. And then when I got in contact with David and found out about the reading, that's when it all took off. And my contribution has been to work alongside David, mainly in developing the professional learning program. So I think you've seen this before. We've got our underpinning of educational linguistics and the social learning theory of Vygotsky, and these are both activated in the teaching and learning cycle. And the additional theoretical underpinning of Reading to Learn really comes with the discourse pattern that's used for the reading, which is based on Bernstein's notion of, you know, distributing knowledge equally amongst the classroom. And David has redesigned the classroom discourse pattern to include a preparation move to include all students in classroom discussion in reading. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about that via one of the projects from the book Reading to Learn, Reading the World, from our colleagues in Argentina. And we've got Samia here. So it was Samia and Christina's work I'll be drawing on. So I'll talk to you about that a little bit later. And so the educational linguistics, this is how we present, you know, the functional model of language to our teachers as a top-down model. And, you know, the big surprise to the teachers is the invisible patterns in the text are actually the genre. So they haven't been able to see what the patterns are. And it's, you know, a really big light bulb moment for teachers when we start working with genres. And then we can look at what's happening in the paragraph and the sentence with the grammar. And teachers often have some notions of, you know, sort of traditional grammar. And we can work with those and sort of direct them towards a more functional understanding of grammar. And then we can work with the spelling patterns and actually looking at the words. And we do that mainly with students in the very early years of schooling, special education context, and people coming from another country to learn the national language. So as second language learners or additional language learners. And so we call it an integrated top-down approach. So I think you're all familiar with this. So we look at the genres of schooling, and we use this to guide us in analysing the text we're going to use in the classroom with the students to know what the purpose of the text is. So we have our purposes to engage, which gives us our story genres, our purpose to inform, which gives us the genres that the disciplinary teachers usually use, and then our evaluating texts, which are often the ones that are used for assessment. And this is a big, another eye-opener for the teachers, that quite often the texts the students are reading are not models for what they have to write in their exams. And so where do we get the models of the written texts from? And so the teachers might have to write the models themselves. They can look maybe on the internet or published exam answers, but they really need to think very carefully about that, we've done different projects where we look at what genres are in textbooks and things, and there are very few examples of the types of arguments that they're supposed to. They usually have to evaluate something, particularly as they get up towards the secondary school and beyond. Okay, so just the social learning theory of Vygotsky. So you've probably seen this model. This is how we model it to the teachers. So you've got developmental gains over time. And in here, this represents what students can do on their own without any support. And of course, we've got students working at different levels along here, some that are sort of struggling, our sort of middle range students, and of course, our more advanced learners. And I always say to the teachers, on Friday afternoon, we don't want to push them up here to be doing anything demanding and new. We just give them something to practice in the zone of actual development. So that's sort of what today's presentation is like. So I'm not going to challenge your thinking so much. It's a celebration, really, of what some people in the room and other people have been doing, and it's just to inspire you. And well, not just, but is to inspire you and, really get you to move on and do something. But it wasn't the time for anything deep and theoretical Friday afternoon, no. So we choose a text which is just beyond what the students can do. Even the top student in the class needs to have some challenge for everybody. And then we provide scaffolding here. And the teachers all say to me, yes, we know what scaffolding is. But when I say, so how did you scaffold your students last week? They really don't know what to say. So they know about the idea of scaffolding, but when am I scaffolding and when I'm not? And the thing with Reading to Learn is the scaffolding is built into the pedagogy. So it is a scaffolding pedagogy. So when you're doing Reading to Learn, you are pushing the students, if you've chosen a text beyond, what they can already, read without support, then you are scaffolding the students. So that's the really good thing, that the teachers then can move on and have a really good understanding about what scaffolding is and how they can do it. So this is how we model to the teachers in the professional development what scaffolding might look like. So there's no time here. So this could be over the course of a lesson, could even be 2 or 3 lessons, or it could be 5 or 10 minutes. So you begin with teacher-led and modeled, which is not telling the students what to do, but modeling for them. And modeling reading is very difficult. It's very difficult because it's imperceptible. So writing, we can model it. We can all see it. We can talk about it. We can do it together. But the reading, we can't. So we have to try and make it visible. And just seeing Jesus here, it reminds me, Jesus, you were talking about visible pedagogy. So the term visible pedagogy has been around for a long time. And it became very fashionable again when Hattie did his tremendous study of, what works in the classroom. And the emphasis came back to the concept of visible pedagogy came back. So this is why we do things like highlighting, and the students come up and write on the board. We do all of those things to make it visible. Then we have the joint practice. And this is when we're actually working in the zone of proximal development, where the expert other, which is the teacher, not another 10-year-old helping one 10-year-old. There can be, a certain amount of help can be given. But if you're going to give the students metacognitive insights to enable them to later do the same task again on their own, you can't rely on another 10-year-old. So I think people talking about peer scaffolding, we'd have to look at what they're saying very carefully. I'm not dismissing it, but we have to think, is that really, if you wanted to learn tennis and you didn't know how to play, would you just ask your children to play with somebody else who didn't know how to play tennis? The idea is you would all want a tennis instructor, wouldn't you? So we could learn. So I sort of, like to inspire the teachers and say, you are the expert. Where I work in Sweden, it's very much that the teacher must not interfere in the learning. The students have to, so I've really got to, wind the teachers up to say, you can teach, you are allowed to teach. And then, of course, we give them the opportunity to practice the skills, and then they do their independent work, and that's what we assess. Because also there's another tradition where while the students are learning, they're being assessed, and it's sort of conflating learning and assessment. But really the assessment should come afterwards when we've built up the skills and the students have had practice, to do as well as they can. So finally, we've got the pedagogic discourse based on Bernstein's notions, and this is David's model. He talks about we have the most involved top students. They can't wait to come to school. They sit at the front of the class. They put their hand up all the time. They love learning. And we have larger and smaller groups of those in every classroom. Teachers tend to tell me their students, 3 or 4, always put their hand up, and the rest, there's another group, they're really happy to listen and they are engaged, but they don't really put their hand up very much. And then there's another group for all sorts of reasons, and they might not make it, and that's, so we want all the students to have the same chance. And so this is the scaffolding cycle that we work with in Reading to Learn. And so David has included a prepare move here, and then the task might just be to identify something in the text, and then we highlight it, right? We're making it. And then this is the teaching move, the elaboration. And we saw a wonderful examples of elaboration from Jesus the other day. So Reading to Learn is just a tool. And if the teacher can see things in the text and what the text can offer, and if you can, the text offers an opportunity to take students to a critical literacy level, you can see how Jesus modeled that for us yesterday. So it just depends. It's a tool, and the teacher needs to be skilled to be able to use it well. So they need to practice. But I just sort of say, well, all of these concepts are there. And if you just work on Reading to Learn, you will be using linguistics, you will be scaffolding, and you will be distributing knowledge more equally in the classroom. So we have our pedagogy cycle. So we just use, we just use our normal curriculum texts in whatever language. So we're fine. We prepare before reading, and then we can go around the outside of the circle like we do in the teaching and learning cycle. Or we can prepare for reading, we can read a whole text, and then we can just pull out a paragraph or so to do detailed reading. And then if we wanted to, we could even just pull out a sentence and we can cut the sentence up. We usually make this, very, kinesthetic. We cut it up and we can cut up the spelling words, we can cut up everything, and then put it all back together and then jumble it up and see if the students can reconstruct. And then that shows that they've got the meaning. So we can go around these circles. We can go here and go around. We can do preparing before reading, go around, preparing before reading, go around here. Or we can choose, it's like a toolbox. We can choose what we do. And I'll just show you quickly a typical sequence before we start. So a typical sequence might be we always begin with preparing before reading. So the teacher explains the content and the structure or the genre of the text in everyday language. Then we might do detailed reading next. So we might go into the inner circle. We choose a paragraph or two, and we're going to identify the key information they use later in writing on the same topic, and they're going to highlight. Then we might make notes. So the students take turns in coming up and writing the notes on the board. So the student that's still at the desk, they've highlighted the words, so they just read them out. The students write them up as notes. The others copy, and they have turns coming to the board and copying and writing up. And the student at the board is not threatened in any way, because the student back at the table that's got the underlined word can spell it out. So all the students need to know is the spelling words. And if they don't know that, they can still come up, because have a guess who can come up and stand next to them and whisper in their ear is the teacher. So every student can participate, and it's proven to be very powerful when the students are writing on behalf of the whole class, and everyone's copying down what they're writing. It's a really powerful learning moment, and the students generally love it. And then, of course, you do the joint rewriting and joint construction, very similar to the teaching and learning cycle. However, we've got the notes there, and we're going to model it on the stages and phases of the text that we read. So that's just a quick run through. And I really direct everybody, anyone who wants to learn more about Reading to Learn, to please have a look in this book, Learning to Write, Reading to Learn by David and Jim. And it's Spanish translation, Leer para Aprender. So you can get that in Spanish. And then the second part of the talk, I'm going to talk about celebrate. How am I going for time? Let me see. Ooh, all right, I'll have to hurry. Yeah, I've got a lot in here. So this is the book, and it's got 17 chapters of examples of Reading to Learn projects from around the world. And it's just, oh, where's Ruben? Ruben said it was Reading to Learn in the wild. And I like that. I like the sound of that. So this is what happens to Reading to Learn once it gets out of the professional development workshop. It goes wild around the world. But I just want you to see the diversity of the projects. So I'll talk a little bit about projects that have been done in Spanish-speaking countries, and we have one project from Portugal, for Portuguese. And just before we do, I'll just share with you something David wrote in the introduction. So he says, one ideal shared by everybody involved in Reading to Learn has been to become a more effective teacher and to help others to do so. So that's, I see what my role is, to help you to also do this with the professional development, and then encourage you to implement it and work with colleagues and undertake projects. Underlying the drive to excel is the democratic ideal that education should be equally available, inclusive, and effective for every student. So it's a social justice project, really, when we're working with Reading to Learn. Oh my goodness, look at that. All those empty wine glasses, my goodness. You know what these conferences are like? Of course, this was a cultural excursion, wasn't it, to that Gillian and Natalia? Yes, was a cultural excursion. I think maybe I took that photo, so maybe I can. She's pointing the finger. Yes, yeah. I know. Shh. I'm presenting myself as a very conservative middle-class educator. And people were very surprised that I went to the Lucha Libre the other night. Yes, yes. We all have a second side. Yes, we all have a second side. So this was IFC in Mendoza, 2014. How could we go, Samia, to Argentina without going out to the wineries? It wasn't possible, was it? So there we go. And of course, we felt obliged to sample. Yes, felt it was an obligation. So here we go. Chapter 15, we'll begin our tour in Argentina. Chapter 15, Universidad Nacional de Cuyo. And here we have Samia, who's with us today, and her colleague, Christina. And I think it was, Anne, were you talking about something Christina had? Yes, Christina, the publications from their university. So very well known to us. These are some of their students. I'm borrowing images from a slide presentation they gave at the IFSC in Boston. And when we heard this presentation, David and I were really taken aback at the scholarly work that had been done and what a good idea it had been. They began by looking at the mandated curriculum in their local area in Mendoza, and then comparing what the literacy approach that was suggested there with Reading to Learn. And so I'm not going to, haven't got time to talk about the other approach. I'll just talk about the Reading to Learn. And of course, you need to look at the chapter or speak to Samia, contact Samia and Christina if you want to know more. So going back to Bernstein, I'm going to be able to explain to you a little bit more about detailed reading via the work in that chapter. So most of the chapters in the book are actually classroom or, you know, a whole school or organization implementations of reading to learn. This is one of the few chapters. It was such scholarly work and so well done. And I've used this many times to describe reading to learn to people, how it actually takes place. So going back to Bernstein and looking at his work on the unequal distribution of knowledge by the teacher in the classroom, we're going to have a look at the redesigned discourse pattern. Instead of the IRF, initiation, response, feedback pattern, we begin with a preparation move that includes all students in the interactions around reading. So Samia and Christina took this excerpt, which is in Learning to Write, Reading to Learn, and we looked at it in my workshop, and that's why I like to use it in the workshop, because you can follow up in the reading about it. So it's from Roald Dahl's fantastic Mr. Fox, and the chapter's called The Shooting, and Mr. Fox is just going out to go and steal some chickens or ducks from a local farmer, but he knows that they could be after him. So he's coming out of his hole at night very, very slowly and very, very quietly. So we'll just look at what happens here, and then we can think about what Jesus was doing yesterday with his university students, because the parallel is there. So we've got, first of all, the interaction is all oriented around the text. So the teacher and the students are all focusing on the text. This is detailed reading. And so we're going to locate the information in the sentence. So first of all, if we look down the side, if you look down the side, we've got the moves here. David's annotated the moves for us here. Prepare the sentence, prepare again, focus, identify, affirm. All right, so have a look, be thinking about the moves here as we go through with what's happening in this text. So to prepare the students and so they know what's going to come, the next sentence tells us he's almost right out of his hole. Watch, and I'll read it. So the sentence is, he was almost right out in the open now. Now, the preparation. At the start, it says how far out he was. Can you see how far out he was? The student says, almost right out. Exactly. Let's highlight almost right out. So what's happening here? We're highlighting the information. We've located the information. We're highlighting it. The student's been affirmed. So it's not so difficult. Any student could really identify that information. So this opens up, engages them in the text. They feel successful, and they're going to really keep going. All right. So now the teacher can elaborate a little bit on this. So the next thing that happens is they say, the teacher says, keep forgetting. So if he's almost right out, what part of him might still be in the hole? The student says, his tail. That's exactly right. All the rest of him is probably outside, and just his long bushy tail is inside. So here we've got an inferential meaning. So we're showing the students how to make inferences, which is the sort of thing Jesus was doing, but on, another level with his university students. But that's what I want you to see. So they're making predictions based on information in the text and finding synonyms. So let's have a look. Can you see the words that mean outside? Almost right out. And the student finishes the sentence, in the open. Excellent, the teacher says. All right, so we're learning the meaning of words and then drawing inferences. And then the open means outdoors, where there's nowhere to hide. And the chapter, this here is called The Shooting. So he's come out of his hole. Now there's nowhere to hide. So the inferential meanings are developing. So how would he feel being out in the open? And the student, scared, worried. Absolutely. That's why he's creeping out so slowly. So we've got building up the logic of the text and really getting the students engaged there. So this is the fantastic work that Christina and Samia did, locating exactly how Reading to Learn is operating through a little text excerpt. And so for analysis purposes, we have the cycle phases where rather than just the 3 moves. So we have the prepare, focus, identify, affirm. And then finally, what I always say to the teachers is the teaching moment, the elaboration. So you can see that these first parts of the first cycle phases in the cycle, they're very regulated interaction with the text and the students, very careful specification of work done that provides support to the learners, need to engage in secure and rich dialogue. I really like those words, Samia. They need to engage in secure and rich dialogue. And then the elaboration move here is the interaction based on the teacher criteria and knowledge of the text in terms of contextual features, the meanings, the vocabulary, graphology, and phonology. And we saw how in a different text, Jesus was able to take it, to another level with his university students, but the opportunity is there for everybody. So what we've got is the preparation, the students to identify the meanings, the focus to identify the wording, decoding, direct to highlight, and then the elaboration. And this is really the teaching moment. And the teacher needs to see these things in the text first. It's what we're working on in our workshop. What can you see in the text? Because you can't give it to the students unless you've read it very carefully yourself and done a bit of an analysis there. So the design at the macro and micro levels of Reading to Learn reflect the mappings of principal patterns onto each other that explain the solid scaffolding that both teachers and students receive. So stronger or weaker waves of classification and framing, the neat top-down unfolding of the cycle, the pattern of preparation, anticipating difficulties, imitation, repetition, application, carefully cueing for meaning, to wording, especially when metaphors involved, the alternation between specialized and more common sense expressions, depending on who holds the semiotic pressure in the interactive work in the text, and carefully shunting between specialized or technical wording and their unpacked alternatives back into incongruent equivalents and so on, multimodal variations as the work with the text unfolds. So it's very deep and very powerful, and I love that analysis that they did in the book on the detailed reading cycle. So in terms of visible pedagogy, which Jesus also mentioned yesterday, is it provides coherent, explicit, and principled scaffolding, and it has implications for teacher training, because teachers themselves need strong scaffolding to be able to understand, use, and hold on to a principled pedagogy sequence that's enacted flexibly. And, the work that Jose David is doing is a really good example of that. I'm sorry if I've forgotten other things from day 1 and day 2, but pointing out those things, it's lovely to see that happening everywhere. And so the students are guided through the interaction cycle in a principled, integrated way via imitation and repetition, from initial decoding to understanding, interpretation, and, as we saw with Jesus, critique. So it is really a very powerful pedagogy, and thank you so much, Samia and Christina, for putting that in our publication. There's some of their students from the rural area in lovely Mendoza. Yeah, fantastic. So now we will stay in Argentina. There's another project, a very small project. So carried out by Patsy, who was on our meeting yesterday, Angelica Gaido and Liliana Anglada. I couldn't find a picture of Belén, but there, and I was there with them in Argentina. So this happened after the Alsval conference in 2017. No wineries there, though. No wineries. But no, it was very nice. We had a very nice time. 10 minutes. Oh, my goodness. All right, I'll skip over this one. So they wanted to train in-service teachers of social and national sciences in Reading to Learn pedagogy. So they had started off with the pre-Congress workshop like we had here, and then they got institutional support, They had some more teacher training workshops. Oh, what did I do there? In 2018, and then they recruited some schools. There's the teachers there in the workshops, and they shared criteria for understanding the texts. And the researchers then mapped the genres of the core textbooks for these subjects. So they looked at their own textbooks and they did a mapping. It ends up not being that different from the mapping in the Reading to Learn materials, but it was their own. And they came up with it themselves by working with the teachers through the book. So it was a really good starting place. They had individual meetings with the teachers, and then the teachers prepared lessons, they got feedback, and then they did the classroom implementation. So the reflections were that the preparation of detailed reading caused teachers to reflect more carefully on language, lexical and grammatical elements, problems for comprehension that needed to be addressed and planned for in the things. Now, this is a really interesting point that I mentioned to the people in my workshop the other day. The researchers concluded that deeply rooted methodologies are very difficult to change, and that providing teachers with theory and examples, no matter how clear, is not always enough. And so it is only through the actual and frequent classroom application that the benefits of Reading to Learn can be seen and valued. And this was mentioned again and again in projects from around the world, that really this sort of lecture style, this can enthuse you and get you started, but it really needs to happen in the classroom. So following the Comenius multilateral project that I wrote about in chapter 9, we had all of these countries participating, and David and Jim came from Australia to give us support. And following this project, which you can read about in the book and other places, I'm going to tell you just briefly things they've done in Portugal and Spain with Reading to Learn. There's our team from Portugal, all known to you. And this is what they looked like in 2011. The one I love looking at is Fausto there. He looks like a little boy. Who knows Fausto? Yes, some of you know Fausto? Yes. So he's really, when we look at Fausto now, he's looking very wise there, very wise academic. And he looks like a little boy there. Yes. So we'll see after a few years what we're all looking like. Yeah, yeah. And so they have, following the project, they developed a database of more than 1,000 school texts, transcribed, categorized by grade, subject, genre, and segmented into stages and phases. They have statistical data on the frequency of genres, description of genre families, etc. I'm going to jump now because I want to show you. It's a series of free access resources on the genres of school. It's on a website. You can get it for free. And in my research group at the Complutense, I'm working with a couple of other researchers, and we're going to try and imitate something a bit similar in Spanish. So anyone who wants to join us with that, let us know. I'm working with Estela Moyano and Juana Fernando Blanca from Toledo. And so this is what the booklets look like. This is the sort of thing they have inside. They've got their own table of genres, and that's the areas they worked in, and that's all of the work there. And you can just go to that website and get all of that. And so we can all read, I think we can all read Portuguese, and even if I can see my Portuguese colleagues, I'm sure they know about it, but yeah, for the Spanish speakers, it's a wonderful resource, and we're trying to imitate it to a certain extent. Some of this was Fausto's PhD research, I think, so it's quite, oh no, okay, quickly. All right, so the project in Spain, our lovely colleague Rachel Whittaker, who helped us to finish editing this book because David became unwell. So this is the research group I work with, along with Elisa Hidalgo McCabe there in Spain. And that was that group in 2011. So they have 3 projects, and they've taken Reading to Learn to teachers in training. So the first project was to further training following the Tel for L project for the lecturers and then how to introduce it to the teachers. Again, they also analyzed their curriculum texts, and they made up lesson planning. They called them fichas didácticas. All right, lesson plans, fichas didácticas. That's very Espanol, isn't it? Yes, yeah. Then you can see Isabel presented this in Boston. There she is in the classroom with her teacher education students. And really, she's doing exactly the same pedagogy as we would do in a secondary school classroom. And then they had a project to evaluate the teacher training. And the interesting part here is that some students had doubts about the need to work on literacy at all. They just assumed that as children had mastered decoding and were able to write words, nothing more was necessary. So that was their teacher education students who just thought literacy is not necessary to teach literacy. All right? Can you comprehend that? Okay. So then they realized they had to do something more. So they put them into a real world context with a service learning project, and they got funded. And so we had 60 second and third year students volunteered to work in Spanish and English because of their CLIL schools that Anne's spoken about. So over 2 months, they did 85 lessons to 10 class groups. And so they realized that there was a difference. So that was like at the beginning, what the students were like. And then after the second day, the students were already writing more. So of course, they've got very positive appraisal of all of this. And I'll just read one of the students. I also asked what the students thought, and one of the students said, lo que más me ha gustado ha sido aprender a hacer frases más cortas, pero con el mismo significado. Lo que menos es estar tan poco tiempo aprendiendo con vosotros. Vais a ser unos profesores fantásticos. So that was lovely from the students. They really do appreciate it. So you can read, Jesus is participated, of course, in the fantastic program in Barranquilla, where I went many times. There's Norma, Naibe, all of the people that we know. And they've published and perhaps spoken here, I think, Jesus, about their ECHO program. So just to alert you to their chapter in there, if you're working at university level, speak to Jesus, read this chapter, or get in contact with the Universidad del Norte. And of course, they've got examples of results there. Ingrid has worked on reading to learn in maths in Chile. She didn't get her data, the pandemic came, but she's written up all the things that they plan to do. And so you can use reading to learn in maths. So it's a very important chapter there. She gives you really clear guidelines of what to do, how to enact some lessons in maths. And she worked with a maths educator on that. And Andres has reported to this group before, and he's written many papers on his fantastic work in a community center with Spanish-speaking mothers, teaching them English. And people were asking me, that's the voucher. The online version, if you want to get the book, is a good option because they Equinox sent it to Natalia and it never arrived. They sent it to, I think, Estela in Argentina. It didn't arrive. So it's probably better to get the online version because it might not arrive. I just want to tell you that the organization the not-for-profit organization, Reading for Life in Sweden, we've had a project for quite some time with teachers of the deaf, and we've got educational videos here. You can just access them for free, and you've got teachers of the deaf using Reading to Learn. So they're all the videos. There's one of David talking there and another one of David congratulating them. So it's written up in chapter 7, bridging the gap between sign language and written text for students who are deaf or have a hearing loss. And so you can go to the page, translate it to English, click on watch the videos, something moved there, that shouldn't be there. Choose settings, that should be down there. Select subtitles, you press Swedish, but then after that comes either Spanish or Portuguese. So you can choose the subtitles in Spanish or Portuguese, then turn the sound off because the voiceover is in Swedish, and you can see them doing Reading to Learn in the classroom in Swedish Sign Language, and you can read It's just the automatic translation. So you'll be able to laugh sometimes, you know, those translations are not good. So I'll just finish there, and I'll thank you very much for listening to me and for staying right till the end. Yay!
Thank you, Claire. And it is now your last chance to speak. Speak now, forever hold your peace. Are there any comments, any questions that you would like to ask Claire?
Thank you, Claire, for that wonderful trip around the world. My question, because you mentioned at one point, you know, teachers deeply rooted ways of doing things, and how easy it can be to slip back into doing those once you lose the momentum of the exhilaration of working on a project with other people and learning from people like you. And has there been follow-up on how teachers are able to maintain this pedagogy in their work?
One of the projects in the book is one that I've been working with the Center for School Development in Gothenburg since 2013, and we've had hundreds of teachers coming to do Reading to Learn, and it's building up communities of practice in the school. I mean, we've got an example. Jose David is able to do it with his students at the university and local schools, and he's there all the time to follow up. But in a case where I'm called in to do professional development, and then I come and go, we have mentoring sessions in between. I used to go and visit the teachers in the school, but since the pandemic, we do it online. And then it's building up the practice at the school, and they have like a lead teacher role. And if we get the lead teacher to do it and they're a good teacher, then they can support people back at the school. But in the chapter that our colleagues from Sweden wrote, they have identified the features of schools that have the most success are the ones where the principals and the literacy leader are involved and continue to support them. And that lines up with all of the information we have on professional development, that, you know, the one-shot professional development doesn't work. So I try and do the professional development as at least a one-year project, to have 8 days, 4 spaced workshops throughout the year, and then mentoring in between. And then we get teachers to collect data on student achievement, a reading comprehension test, a writing sample at the beginning, and then to repeat that again at the end. And then the teachers, the school community, the parents get some data. So there's a whole lot of things you have to factor in there. You always have your super teachers who will do all of this. And then you have the other ones that if the structure is there, they will take the opportunity and they will follow up. And then you always lose a few. But, you know, sometimes it's not the right time. I've had teachers that dropped out because I've been working so long in Gothenburg. I've had teachers that dropped out a few years ago, and then they come back and they say, oh, you know, my mother was really sick, or, you know, I just had a new baby and I couldn't concentrate. And they go back to the school and everyone else has moved on with Reading to Learn and they want to be part of it. And they say, can I do it again? Can I do the course again? So it's hard. And there's quite a lot of, you know, professional development literature around that we draw on, but I can only work within the circumstances under which I'm, you know, contracted by people. And sometimes they say, like what we do here, you know, 8 hours, for example, it can get people started, and the people here are exceptional. You know, they've paid, they've given up their own time, they've come to this, so they're likely to do it. But sometimes teachers get sent by the principal, you know, we want to fix this one up, you know, we're sending you to Reading to Learn. And, you know, pick up your feet type of thing. And of course, sometimes that actually works. I had one young man who the principal had told him it was his last chance in Sweden. And after the course, he said, you know, he said, I think you're onto something. And if I was going to do something, this is what I would do. Yeah. He said, and of course he resigned later, which was the best choice. He just wasn't suited for the teaching. So I could write a book on the anecdotes with the teachers. But yeah, it's a challenge. That's really my challenge, because I know if they do reading to learn, they will get some results. But how do you keep supporting them, to do it? Yeah. Films, get them to publish, get them to present. Yeah. Great question.
I think we have.
Yeah. Yeah. Jose David.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation and showing us that SFL is about thinking and learning, but also tasting wine. Wonderful. And my question has to do with the remark you made that it takes, it's very difficult for teachers to change the way they teach, for us teachers to change the way we teach. And one of the things that is part of that way of teaching is that we rarely plan our interactions with learners. We plan lessons, we select materials, we plan activities, but we rarely plan how we're going to interact with the students. In Reading to Learn, then you propose, or Reading to Learn proposes a very carefully structured interaction sequence. I want to know, in your experience, what is teachers' usual reaction to having their interaction planned in such a structured way, and how much buy-in do you think there has been regarding this sequence?
Well, a lot of teachers say that when they started, that just seems to be too much to focus on, and they've got their script and they don't like having a script because they're used to just, speaking out. But once they start getting the reaction from the students, if they do it well enough, even though it may not be done, according to the way it should, sometimes I say, well, why don't you just start with 1 or 2 sentences? You don't even have to do a whole text, just a couple of sentences, and just prepare it. And once they see the effect, we usually get the buy-in from the effect. And that's why we, in previous projects before the pandemic, I would go and visit them in the school, and they could talk about the how to do it, and we could even practice and rehearse. We asked them to do a little bit of filming, and we can give them feedback on what they're doing, but they usually say they find it a bit awkward. But then I have whole schools where people are now uploading their lesson plans onto a platform, and so the new teachers have got a lot of support. So it's really getting that support in the school environment. But yes, they do find it hard, but some teachers love it. There's always the ones that say, yes, it's much better, and they say, then I can focus on all those kids that have been mucking around, and because I've got it there, I don't have to think about what to say. And then they share it, and it's really good. Yeah. So it's good and bad. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Muchas gracias. Perdón, voy a hacer el cambio al español porque mi inglés es una desgracia. Entonces, quería preguntar si hay experiencias del empleo de esta pedagogía en contextos no convencionales de enseñanza escolar. Es decir, en México, por ejemplo, tenemos 2 casos muy concretos. La enseñanza multigrado, es decir, son escuelas donde un solo profesor atiende estudiantes de primero, segundo, tercero, y otro atiende los de cuarto, quinto, sexto. Entonces tiene como que interactuar con niños que están en distintos niveles o grados escolares, por un lado. Y por otro lado, si ha habido experiencias en contextos multiculturales, donde no solamente se trata de estudiantes que no están tal vez lo suficientemente motivados por la enseñanza o que, no sé, no quieren aprender, sino que en realidad sienten una suerte de rechazo por el contenido, en tanto que implica incluso cuestiones identitarias, ¿no? Como ha descrito la doctora Adriana Bolívar, si no me equivoco, que dice que hay algunos estudiantes de nivel licenciatura que no entienden por qué tienen que usar las voces de otros cuando ellos son estudiantes con propia voz, ¿no? Me preguntaba si se ha empleado como en este tipo de contextos y qué tanto éxito ha tenido o podría tener, ¿no? Si se aplicara. Gracias.
Sí, hay muchos, la primera parte de la pregunta, hay muchos contextos donde los profesores tienen estudiantes de múltiples edades en una sola clase. El ejemplo que voy a dar, porque es el que me viene en este momento, es en Suecia. Cada niño tiene el derecho de tener enseñanza en su idioma natal. Entonces, donde trabajo en Gotemburgo, hay mis talleres de Reading to Learn toman lugar en el Centro de Lenguas, donde tienen 300 profesores de 33 idiomas distintos que circulan por los colegios en Gotemburgo para dar clases en lengua materna o de ayudarles en la lengua materna de hacer la materia en sueco, y tienen aulas ahí en el centro también donde algunos vienen, y cuando vienen, si es chino, por ejemplo, entonces no pueden ir así a todas las escuelas porque hay uno o dos estudiantes, los juntan tantas veces a la semana y ahí tienen todos los grados. Entonces, siempre trabajamos con ellos y la idea es de elegir un texto en común y después tener diferentes tasks, learning tasks, según el nivel. Entonces, se puede hacer la lectura, el profesor puede leer un cuento, pueden hacer la lectura detallada con los niños más pequeños, después con los otros, pueden reescribir un cuento, o sea, están todos trabajando, pero con el mismo texto pueden tener distintos learning activities, yeah. Yeah. Y la segunda parte de la pregunta era acerca de... los que no quieren aprender. No, no. Okay, okay. Bueno, la idea es de Reading to Learn, es de engage. What's engage? Engage. Involucrarlos a través de ese patrón de discurso. Si la oración es agriculture declined following the Industrial Revolution. Yeah. Who can see the first word in the sentence that says farmers planting crops? All right. And they look down. Oh, I just see this word. So the kid says agriculture. Exactly right. All right. But is that all the farmers do? Do they plant crops? What else do farmers do? And they start saying, oh, milk cows, do this. Okay. So this word brings together all of those activities and we call it agriculture. And the kids, oh, okay. Do you see what I mean? It's just like trying to engage them in the text by making them successful, because they're usually disengaged because they can't get into the text. You know what I mean? So, and I mean, David's got really good examples, particularly from Indigenous learners in the outback. They had lots of negative experiences. And so we all have those students. So it's just to try, really. And the pedagogy is flexible. Somebody was saying it was flexible the other day in their presentation. And so it's just using it in flexible ways. So there are successes and there are cases where you can't, reach students. As I'm never going to say it's 100% successful, but it, offers that opportunity. Yeah. Thank you. Samia.
Thank you. It's not a question, really. I would like to thank you for the presentation, for your enthusiasm and your joy in doing what you do, and for inviting us into this project, which might get wild at some point, but
yes.
We are
wild. Yeah.
But you brought enthusiasm into our task, and you brought a wonderful group of people and researchers and teachers all around the world to do this. And it's been a very inviting project. And as teacher trainers, we do work in teacher training. We try to instill this into younger generations. So we hope to be able to continue doing that. It's just that. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Samia. That's very kind. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you very much, everybody. So is it fiesta now? Fiesta? Oh, okay. Thank you. Oh, sí, 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 eso lo voy a guardar. Oh. Oh, terminé el Zoom. Oh, perdón, es que no pude ver esto para cerrar ahí.
¿Pasa? Para que no batallen cuando suban.
No, pero
Entonces lo pasamos de mano en mano.
Tú vas a hablar, ¿no? Y yo nada más
Nada más los
los
infinitos y
despido, ¿no?
agradecimientos, sí. Ya nada más
¿Quieres
tierras.
micrófono?
No, todavía no. No tengo nada.
¿Lo quieres aquí o acá?
Por acá.
No.
Rodrigo, sí, ¿verdad?
Rodrigo, pues no, ahí está. Rodrigo, tú.
Empezamos. Ah. Sí, creo que sí lo vamos a pensar en nuestra realidad. No sabemos qué significa. Sería así, groundbreaking.
No podemos hacerlo después o algo, ¿no? Ah, ah, sí. Gracias, Fernanda.
Muy bien. Alejo un poquito el micrófono. Gracias por, como dijo Claire, por estar aquí hasta este punto de esta edición del Congreso. Es siempre muy grato. Y bueno, pues ha llegado el momento de cerrar las actividades que han conformado esta edición del Congreso de la Asociación de Lingüística Sistémico-Funcional de América Latina, el cual ha sido un esfuerzo conjunto entre la Escuela Nacional de Lenguas, Lingüística y Traducción de la UNAM y la Facultad de Lenguas de la Benemérita Universidad Autónoma de Puebla. Para ello, presiden este emotivo acto la doctora María del Carmen Contillo Gescontria, directora de la Escuela Nacional de Lenguas, Lingüística y Traducción. La doctora Claudia García Yampaya, secretaria de la ENALD, no nos acompaña, pero envía sus felicitaciones por el cierre de actividades. Está con nosotros asimismo el maestro Rodrigo Olmedo y Eudico Becerril, jefe del Departamento de Investigación de la ENALD. La doctora Natalia Ignatieva, presidenta del comité organizador de esta edición. Y el doctor Daniel Rodríguez Vergara, vicepresidente de la mesa directiva de la ALSFAL. Bueno, comencemos este acto con unas breves palabras de la doctora Natalia Ignatieva como representante del comité organizador. Adelante.
Bueno, gracias. No sé si. ¿Voy? Bueno. Bueno, como acabo de decir, Julio, es un momento, por un lado, muy satisfactorio para nosotros porque creo que trabajamos mucho en esta semana y era una semana de unas actividades muy intensas, ¿no? Primero el taller, ¿no? Nuestros talleres que todos resultaron también excelentes, los talleres, bueno, según dicen todos los que asistieron a los talleres, y luego 3 días también de otro trabajo muy, muy intenso de del Congreso propio, ¿no? Y también, o sea, quisiera agradecer a los plenaristas que llegaron acá, aceptaron nuestras invitaciones y otra vez, todas las plenarias eran excelentes. Recibimos muchas felicitaciones por invitar a los que invitamos. Así que, como digo, es muy satisfactorio todo esto. Y pues les quiero leer algunos números. Entonces, en total recibimos 190, más bien se registraron 190 personas para este congreso, de los cuales 75 eran asistentes y 116 ponentes. Total de propuestas recibidas, 90, pero unas cuantas fueron canceladas porque las personas no pudieron llegar. Y total de presentaciones, 73, es el que actualmente se presentaron, ¿no? Presentaciones por país, hubo 28 conferencistas de México, de Brasil tuvimos 14 personas, de Chile 15, Colombia 6, Estados Unidos 2, Costa Rica 2, España 2, Argentina 1, India 1, Austria 1 y Corea del Sur 1. Esa es la geografía, ¿no? de nuestro encuentro. Y presentación por temas, análisis del discurso 15, aplicaciones educativas 14, valoración 11, discurso de sociedad 7, multimodalidad 7, discurso de las ciencias 4, traducción y lexicología 4, léxico-gramática 4, lingüística de corpus 3, inclusividad 2 y códigos de legitimación 2. Sí, esto es algunos números de nuestro Congreso y espero que todo el mundo haya disfrutado de las ponencias. Otra vez tengo que decir que varias personas me comentaron de nivel bastante alto de las ponencias y de todas las presentaciones de este Congreso, ¿no? Lo cual también es muy satisfactorio, agradable para nosotros, ¿no? Y por otro lado, creo que la convivencia estaba muy cálida, discutimos mucho, tanto en las ponencias mismas como fuera, ya en café y todo, y como ya es la costumbre en nuestros congresos, sí, convivencia muy cálida, muy intensa también y muy agradable, ¿no? Entonces, quiero agradecer, pues aprovechar este espacio también para agradecer en primer lugar la dirección de nuestra escuela, del cual recibimos siempre un apoyo incondicional, ¿no? Agradecemos muchísimo porque sin no podríamos haber organizado este congreso. Solamente cuando la dirección, las autoridades apoyan plenamente se puede hacer este tipo de actividades, ¿no? Y también los departamentos, el departamento de investigación que encabeza Rodrigo, el departamento de cómputo, siempre muy amables, siempre también ayudándonos, departamento de comunicación social, también, no sé quién más, de departamento. ¿Cómo? Servicios audiovisuales. No conozco bien la estructura, toda la estructura. Cada vez se hace más compleja, ¿no? Y uno se queda con como era antes. Bueno, y bueno, last but not least, mi equipo de trabajo, mi comité organizador, presentes aquí, Daniel Rodríguez, Julio Valerde, Vicky Zamudio, Guillermo Jiménez Sánchez, en primer lugar, ¿no? Sin este equipo no haría esto, ¿no? Porque un magnífico equipo. Nosotros decimos en ruso, con este equipo iría al agua y al fuego. Bueno, entonces, bueno, también participaron nuestros alumnos de doctorado, Rubén Mora, Tatiana Simon, que tuvo que salir, muchos alumnos de maestría y doctorado y licenciatura que nos ayudaron. ¿Quién más? No sé. Bueno, y claro, mucho agradecimiento a todos los participantes de este congreso, como siempre, con mucho entusiasmo. Yo espero que lo que tuvimos aquí en estos días sería como una inspiración para su trabajo cuando regresan a sus respectivos lugares de trabajo, ¿no? Entonces, feliz regreso a todos y nos vemos en Brasil, en próximo congreso. Muchas gracias.
¿Vas a decir algo?
Muchas gracias, Natalia. Por supuesto, no pueden faltar palabras de cierre del doctor Daniel Rodríguez, vicepresidente de ALSFAL, que a nombre de la mesa directiva también tiene palabras para compartir con nosotros.
No, simplemente a nombre del presidente de la asociación, Rodrigo Esteves de Lima López, también manda una felicitación a la institución y a todos los involucrados. De parte del presidente, de todo el comité ejecutivo, estamos muy agradecidos con la UNAM, la ENALT, la BUAP, el posgrado en lingüística que también nos apoyó. Todos nos apoyaron, todos los departamentos involucrados aquí de la ENALT. Toda la gente que está tras bambalinas, ¿no? Entonces también sin ellos no habría sido posible realizar este evento. Entonces, muchas gracias a todos y a todos ustedes por su asistencia, porque también sin asistentes no hay evento. Entonces, muchas gracias y no me queda más que hacerles una invitación al próximo Congreso. Y no sé si, Sara, quieras oficializar también esta invitación.
Bom, nós teremos então o 20º Congresso da Associação de Linguística Sistêmico-Funcional do Brasil, na capital do Brasil, no próximo ano, Brasília, no mês de outubro. Estão todos convidados a comparecerem. Nós estamos agora começando a fazer os preparativos, né? E a presença de vocês será extremamente importante. Brasília é uma cidade que foi construída. Vocês não encontrarão em Brasília, por exemplo, prédios históricos. Brasília foi uma cidade encomendada pelo presidente Juscelino Kubitschek e ele contratou o grande arquiteto da época, que é Niemeyer, Oscar Niemeyer. Então, a cidade toda foi construída por ele. E a cidade se comporta, ela se configura como se fosse um avião. Então, vocês vão ouvir falar na asa norte, a asa sul, né? São termos que vocês vão usar bastante. Outro detalhe, é muito difícil andar a pé em Brasília, porque é tudo muito longe. Claro que nós vamos ficar no campus, e estando no campus, não haverá problema de locomoção, claro. Mas não é uma cidade, por exemplo, como aqui, que vocês saem à rua e já encontram lojas, shoppings, etc. Então, o transporte tem que ser todo por carro, né? Por aplicativos. Mas é importante que seja no Brasil a realização deste evento, porque o Brasil tem muita produção em linguística sistêmico-funcional e será uma oportunidade de nós congregarmos tanto a produção do Brasil quanto a dos nossos amigos latino-americanos e também dos nossos amigos dos outros países europeus que estão aqui. Então, estão todos convidados. Eu me senti um pouco na obrigação de avisá-los em relação ao comportamento lá. Há uma outra coisa que é importante. O clima de Brasília é um clima muito seco. Então, é importante que vocês levem... como é que eu digo, Orlando? Para o nariz? Soro. Levem soro para o nariz. O hidratante também, porque ela foi construída no meio do Cerrado. O Cerrado é uma região assim, bastante agreste. Mas é uma cidade lindíssima, com prédios extremamente importantes para o Brasil. E lá está a sede do governo federal também. Se quiserem chegar lá no Planalto, dá uma olhadinha. Planalto é onde fica o nosso presidente, fica ali na ala importante de Brasília. Tá? Então, estão todos convidados, será muito bom recebê-los em 2025. Obrigada.
Bueno, y finalmente, unas palabras de felicitación, tanto por la organización, al comité organizador, por todos ustedes, felicitarlos por estar en este congreso y, segundo lugar, por ser esta comunidad que son, unidos, motivados, muy apasionados y sobre todo, como ya lo dijeron, muy cálidos. Pocas veces hay comunidades de práctica que son tan cálidas, tan de veras que contagian su motivación a todos los que estuvimos en este congreso. Muchas gracias por ser así. Larga vida a la asociación. Espero hayan tenido una semana en la que estuvieron muy contentos y también decirles que en pocas ocasiones tienen el combo completo. La experiencia fue completa con lo que sucedió el día de hoy. Y culturalmente, pues sí fue una experiencia a lo que lo único que le faltó fue para aquellos que se asustaron, el bolillo. Siempre en México, cuando alguien recibe un susto muy fuerte, ya que pasó el evento, se les da un pedazo de pan tipo baguette, que nosotros llamamos bolillo. Eso fue lo que faltó al final, pero están muy invitados a pasar al vestíbulo de aquí abajo para hay bolillo acompañado de queso o jamón o algo rico y que espero todos disfruten y sean, bueno, pues ahí está ya la cita hecha. Esperamos que la escuela que quedó muy feliz de recibirlos y estuvimos todos muy contentos. Carmelita, creo que también ya hasta es parte del ALFAL, porque estuvo aquí y Oscar de Comunicación Social se sienten parte de ello. Muchas gracias a todas y a todos y nos vemos en Brasil.
Muy bien, pues gracias Carmen, gracias a todos. Los invitamos a compartir con nosotros un brindis con el que celebramos habernos visto otra vez. Nos vemos en el futuro cercano y les invitamos a que estén atentos porque después de este pequeño brindis, muy generosamente Guillermo Jiménez y Daniel Rodríguez han propuesto guiar un recorrido por Ciudad Universitaria que desde 2005 es Patrimonio Cultural de la Humanidad. Entonces, aquellos interesados, no se pierdan. En breve estarán con ustedes. Bienvenidos siempre que lo deseen. Hasta pronto.